Hey, good morning, everybody. I am live with Andrew Lownie, and he is making a stir with his new book. We have had reactions from the royal family, from Andrew, Fergie, and Prince Harry, and just some of the revelations in the book. I'll list a few before we go over them in way more detail. So we have got Andrew and Epstein's relationship. We're going to do a deep dive into that. We're going to be talking about secrets passed to foreign officials, including the Mossad, Saudi Arabian authorities, Libyan intelligence services by Epstein. We are going to look at whether material on Andrew was passed to Putin. There is a alleged punch-up with Harry and Prince Andrew that Harry has come out and denied already. This is great. And then we're going to look at the mysterious finances because, you know, these people hide under the cloak of doing charity work or international business work, just like Jimmy Savile. It's a cloak, isn't it? While they're pocketing money and doing other things to people, let's just say. And we'll look also into Andrew's eye-popping personal life. One claim from a Bangkok hotel room, he was 10 girls a day were coming to his room. So we've got lots to talk about here. And the links for Entitled, The Rise and Fall of the House of York are in the description box below this video. You can also follow Andrew Lownie on X, and all the links are down there. And I'll put them in the live chat as well. So, my friend, it's been a while since we spoke about Mountbatton and his perverse ways. Congratulations on the new book, and I'm seeing you everywhere, all over the TV, all over the media. And so was it a natural progression then to go from Mountbatton to Prince Andrew?
Yes, they seem to have followed through. I mean, it's the third of a trilogy of books in which Mountbatton was the first, the study of the marriage of Louis and Edwina Mountbatten, and the open marriage. Then we had the second royal marriage story, which was Duke and Duchess of Windsor, the great love story of the 20th century, or was it? And now we have the happiest divorced couple ever, or are they? And of course, having looked at the relationship, I also looked at Epstein and particularly their financial affairs. The theme of this is financial corruption at the heart of the royal family. The way that both Andrew and Fergie have leveraged their royal status to make personal fortunes.
So when you were researching this book then, which revelations did you find the most fascinating?
Well, I think the most shocking, and it grieves me to say this as a great a fan of the late Queen, is that the Queen knew what was going on and didn't do anything about it. She in fact entertained some of these dodgy dictators. And when people tried to complain about what Andrew was up to, she just stuck her head in the sand and wouldn't countenance it. So that was shocking. I think the extent of the relationship with Epstein, the length of the relationship, the fact that Andrew has lied about how early it started, the closeness of the relationship that Sarah had with Epstein. There were more numbers for her in his book than for Andrew. And as you say, this gobsmacking sort of personal life that Andrew seems to have managed. So, yeah, I mean, someone very kindly said there was a headline on every page. And what's been nice is we've been able to run stories almost every day for the last week and a half, completely new stories, new stuff being picked up. And I'm keen, that I can update the book for the paperback and that maybe other people will come forward. But you've done some great work in this area, and I'm fascinated to hear what your take is on some of this.
Yeah, we've got a lot of overlap on some of the characters you've researched and some of the people I've interviewed over the years. And we will get to that because it's going to be fascinating to compare notes. So when you watched Prince Andrew on the BBC interview then, and he told us that he didn't sweat, that he doesn't go out in London in casual clothes, that, on and on and on and on it went, instantly rebutted on Twitter, a lot of it. I mean, what were you thinking? Was this a clash of the old world news control mechanisms versus modern technology?
Well, I mean, I did watch the interview in November 2019. At that point, I had no intention of writing about Andrew. I was still working on my book Traitor King, but I did think, that he's crazy to have done this interview. And the more I discover about it, the crazier it was. I mean, it's an extraordinary story. I mean, one of the revelations is that Newsnight actually were only given this story 72 hours before transmission. The company that was really researching this was an offshoot based in Ireland of the BBC, the Panorama office. And they quietly got on with this away from any scrutiny from Portland Place. And actually, rather shockingly, the BBC were quite keen to shut them down. And the Palace actually were talking to lots of journalists about doing interviews. It wasn't something exclusive with Newsnight. They were looking for, I think, a soft interview. And I think they made the wrong call. They thought that Newsnight might do that. Panorama had a hard-hitting right to reply they wanted to put in. They had an interview with Jeffrey already. And I think the Palace were looking for any way to avoid talking to Panorama. So there's an interesting background to the famous interview, but that, of course, is a seminal point where, Andrew is basically finished.
So, let's go back then and look at some of the factors that led to his behavior. I mean, how far back did you go? Did you look at the psychology of his childhood?
Yes, I did. I mean, and you're absolutely right. The child is father of the man. We had exactly the character that we see now then. Very self-important, arrogant, pompous, entitled. There's a story I tell of him actually nicking someone's, at the age of 8, nicking someone's stamp collection and putting his name in it. The sense that, basically he can do what he wants. And of course, no boundaries, no one actually telling him this was wrong. And so in some ways, he was, as people said to me, an accident waiting to happen.
So we've seen, kind of peculiar behavior coming from Prince Harry. Do you think that the pressure on the siblings when they're not, first in line to the throne, do you think that creates some kind of dysfunction in the siblings?
No, I don't. I mean, I think the extraordinary thing is, both Princess Anne, who was number 2, and Edward, who was number 4, they quietly got on with this, carving a role for themselves, doing their public duties, being very popular. So there's no reason why Andrew couldn't have done that. I mean, I think Charles felt that Andrew had every advantage. Charles's life was preordained. He couldn't actually really properly serve in the Navy. Andrew could do what he wanted, have the career he wanted, could go and chase women quite safely with no one reporting it. So he had every advantage and he threw it away.
So when did the women chasing begin?
Well, he was known as Randy Andy even at Gordonstoun. But again, one of the shocking things was to discover that he was sexually active even pre-teenage. At the age of 11, he's supposed to have lost his virginity. And this may explain the fact that he is such a sort of sex addict, because in some ways he's a sex victim. He's actually was abused as a child. And that's come from a member of his staff. So, it does put him in a slightly more sympathetic light to understand his behavior, because, it is extraordinary, just how promiscuous he's been. And the fact that no one has come forward and no one has leaked stories, none of the press have run stories. I'm just amazed that this has now seemed to be news when so many people seem to know about it.
So what's the story of him losing his virginity at age 11?
Well, he's supposed to have been taken by the father of a friend to a brothel, which seems a strange thing for a friend's father to do. But, who knows what goes on in those circles.
Yeah, because I remember decades ago then, he was quite popular in the media. It was kind of like a male thing, Randy Andy. He's this dashing young man dating all of these model type women. And then you added the war hero story into it as well. His popularity seemed to be quite high during those years when I was younger. So was that a carefully cultivated trajectory of his image in the mainstream media back then?
Well, I mean, I do call it the rise and fall, and you're absolutely right. I mean, he was this very popular figure. He had an idea that he might actually be made regent. that Charles's marital problems would force him to step down, and he would stand in until William was of age. And he was being pushed by the royal household to do trips because he was wildly popular. It's hard to believe now, and hard to believe that Charles would say to Diana, why can't you be more like Sarah Ferguson? Because the two have sort of fallen so far from grace. But yeah, they were initially very popular. People felt they were a breath of fresh air. They seemed very natural and normal. And it's sad to see what has happened. But I think Sarah Ferguson, basically, Paul Borrell says, went into the sweetie shop and went wild. And we can chart that. That's the advantage of the biography. We can chart that transition from this very normal middle-class woman who suddenly gets airs and graces when she gets into the royal family. And I think the poor pressure put on Andrew with this woman who was, a real spendthrift, and was forcing him to, get involved with people like Epstein to raise money to pay her debts.
So the war hero narrative, then, was that legitimate or was that embellished?
Yes, all the evidence I found is that he did his bit during the war. He was one of the Sea King pilots. He was not given any special treatment. They couldn't afford, with only 8 Sea Kings on board, to not use him. It was dangerous work, not necessarily dangerous because the Argentinians were firing at them, that they were, but just, by the nature of the weather conditions, the fact that they operated in darkness, they were all very tired. So yes, I don't think we can take that away from him. I mean, the naval forums are full of stories claiming to be from people who served with him, saying he had special preferential treatment, but I didn't find any of that. I talked to his commanding officer in the Falklands and his naval mentor in the Navy, and I don't think that they were very open with me, and that there was nothing there I felt that they were trying to deceive me about.
So at what point did he become a global business ambassador for the UK?
Well, when he came out of the Navy in 2001, he'd got as far as he could go. He was commander. He'd frankly been over-promoted even then. People didn't know what to do with him. And they came up with this bright idea to take over from the Duke of Kent as this trade envoy. They thought that he would be useful for getting into places where perhaps politicians couldn't get, like the monarchies in the Middle East. So he worked from 2001 to 2011. But almost immediately, there were complaints about his rather boorish behavior, his ineffectiveness, complaints made to the palace, and nothing was done. And in many ways, the only reason he went in 2011 was that Christopher Geit, who was the Queen's private secretary, basically maneuvered him out. And because of the Epstein revelations, it had nothing to do with Air Miles Andy and all the complaints about him as special representative. So, that's again one of the shocking things, how he was protected. And even when he left in 2011, he was still doing trade missions paid for by the taxpayer and still doing private business on the side with no one seeming to care.
So have I missed out any other major things that happened in his life during his rise?
No, I think that those are the main points. He joined the Navy in 1979. He came out 21 years later, and they divorced, of course, very, very quickly. I mean, they were separated within 6 years, divorced within 10. Didn't see a great deal of each other in the early stages of the marriage, and that's why everyone is so perplexed by the fact that they're such good friends now and living together, 26 years after they got divorced.
Would you say that he sowed the seeds of his fall somewhere in his rise, or did it all come later?
No, I think the signs were there. I mean, even when he was going off on these promotions in the early 80s, he was kind of cocking it up. There was a point where he went to deal with the Lockerbie disaster and made some very injudicious comments. There was a point in Los Angeles in 1982 when he turned a paint gun on the journalists around him, covering their clothes and camera equipment with paint, and had to pay them compensation. So there is almost a sort of built-in self-sabotage with him that is difficult to understand. So no, there were signs early on, and when I talk to people, as I say, they all said this was an accident waiting to happen. I don't know what you do with him. You couldn't at the age of 40 park him in Balmoral and just leave him alone. But clearly he had to be managed, and he wasn't managed well enough.
And what were the reasons that he and Fergie divorced?
Well, they were told to divorce by the Queen. Both of them were having affairs. It was all looking pretty unseemly for the public, the Queen thought. I think that two of the worst things that were happening were that she was being caught with a man called Steve Wyatt, who had rather dubious links to Libya and Iraq. And then she was involved with her financial advisor, John Bryan, he was caught sucking her toes in August 1992. So, there were just too many things happening. People were criticizing her as freebie Fergie. There were complaints about her extravagance, not really pulling her weight in the royal family. So there was a sense that, basically she needed to be shunted out.
What did you think about the toe sucker's rebuttal to that? Because I listened to him get interviewed, and he said that the kids were there and he was just playing a game, and it wasn't really a toe sucking fetish.
Yeah, no, I think he's right. I mean, we all use that shorthand, but I do believe John Bryan, who I interviewed and had dinner with twice, they were playing, he claimed, Cinderella, and he was kissing her feet, and he was very popular with the children, and it was, he was giving her the emotional stability that Andrew couldn't provide. I think what's extraordinary about that story is that there were protection officers literally beside them, and yet they hadn't noticed that there were these paparazzi running around in the woods pretty close to them over several days, who could easily have been assassins. And I think that's one of the themes, that keeps coming up in the book. There's another point where Andrew is trying to seduce this woman in Hawaii, and the woman's husband rather, has put a private detective onto her, thinking she's having an affair with Kevin Costner, and then finds that actually she's having dinner with Prince Andrew instead. But they were literally in bushes, 30 yards away. But part of the problem was Andrew was refusing to sign people into the security gate at Buckingham Palace. He was very offensive to anyone who challenged him about these visitors, who range from prostitutes through to people like Ghislaine Maxwell, Caprice, and others. And I think that was part of the problem. And I think Paul Page has talked about this.
Yeah, so we relaunched our Paul Page podcast this morning, and some of the allegations he made included that Ghislaine Maxwell was coming in off the books, that they were having romantic picnics together, and that they were possibly lovers.
Yes, I think that's all true.
You think that is all true? Did you find any other evidence to corroborate what Paul said?
Yes, I talked to one of Ghislaine's best friends who said exactly that.
So how did Andrew and Ghislaine first meet?
Well, I mean, the story is that they'd known each other since she was at Oxford in the 80s. I don't buy that. There's no way they move in the same circles. But I think it was in New York where she was a great socialite, so was Fergie. And I think the introduction came through Fergie. And Fergie introduced Ghislaine to Andrew. And of course introduced Andrew to Epstein.
So that predates the mainstream media narrative then, doesn't it?
Yes, the mainstream narrative is 1999, that's what he said. But even Alistair Watson, Andrew's private secretary, has written to the papers saying it was the early 90s. Steve Hoffenberg said it was 1991. So, that's one of the many lies that Andrew has told. And it's, we have this period where we don't know entirely what was going on, what sort of business arrangements were going on. Clearly, it becomes much more important after 2001, where Andrew actually takes Epstein on some of these trade trips and drums up business for him and takes a cut of the action.
So the mainstream media narrative as to how Maxwell met Epstein was that she was mourning her father's death and she went to the States. But we interviewed Ari Ben Menashe, and he's possibly going to be coming back on next week as well, viewers. I've been speaking to him recently. And he said that Robert Maxwell, had this massive spy network going, and that Robert Maxwell brought Epstein into the fold, that Ari didn't like him, and Ghislaine and Jeffrey knew each other well before the mainstream saying that it happened when she went to America when she was mourning. Did you ever look into that side of it, the story?
A little bit. It's not, because there's such a lot of ground to cover. I didn't. I mean, clearly there's Craig Unger's American Compromat. I mean, there are, clearly various secondary sources which talk about, and I think Michael Wolff talks about this. I mean, the way that Maxwell brought his money across, was working with Trump with basically laundering money, and Epstein was part of that laundering episode. So, I've really only had to rely on secondary sources there.
So what about the way Paul Page described Andrew treating staff members? Very condescending, rude, swearing a lot. Did you find a lot of that with other staff members?
Absolutely. I mean, the whole sections of the book dealing with his bizarre behavior and his rudeness to staff who he didn't sort of feel were normal human beings. And even pretty high-flying staff, heads of household, were treated in the same way. And that's why I think the bullying allegations against Meghan Markle have been suppressed, because it would, of course, trigger people coming forward to say, well, if you're investigating what she did, what about looking at Andrew? There's plenty of material, and it keeps coming in. I mean, it's often the same sort of stuff. I mean, just his very, very short fuse, his arrogance to people. And I have stories of people spending the whole day with him. I mean, diplomats showing him round, and him clearly not actually even noticing them because he introduces himself to them that evening. I think he's a complete narcissist. There seem to be several of them in the royal family at the moment.
And how badly were these tales of him treating staff members? Have you got any anecdotes?
Yeah, I mean, it's shouting at cooks because they've done something to the meat that he didn't want. Shouting clearly at policemen. There's a famous story of policemen catching him as an intruder when he went for a walk in the grounds and giving him a good kicking until, in quotes, they realized it was Prince Andrew. So, I mean, they got their own back. And stories with senior people. I have a story with a man called David Anderson who ran the household at Hillsborough, being told he was a fucking imbecile because he said he called the Queen Mother rather than Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth. There's a story with he's very rude to people like Princess Diana's detective, asking him to move from a window seat on the royal flights because he wanted to have a window seat. Ken Worf said that he was one of the rudest men he met. And actually, if you look at the comments below any of the articles that have appeared recently, they almost all have stories from people recounting his rudeness. It's extraordinary. I mean, most of us try to get on with people and get people to like us. He seems to be absolutely the opposite. If he's got some sort of Tourette's syndrome.
So he's rude to everybody. Why did he dovetail with Epstein?
Well, Epstein gave him contacts, which is what he said in the Newsnight interview, and of course paid off Fergie's bills and gave him this ready supply of women and gave him the high life. Not many of his friends had islands and ranches and Palm Beach mansions. And for Epstein, here was a useful idiot that it gave him respectability and opened some doors for him because of his trade role. So it was a win-win situation for both of them.
So if we're going to talk about, Andrew's usefulness to Jeffrey then in proper context, there's a variety of theories as to what Jeffrey was up to. He's part of a network versus he was a lone wolf. Where do you lie with all the theories about what Jeffrey was doing?
Well, I don't think he was a lone wolf. I mean, I think he certainly operated within networks. And I think that's beginning to emerge. And I think it's one of the reasons why people are so nervous now and so keen to suppress these Epstein files. It was a bigger operation than people realize, because no one has been able to explain how Epstein rose so quickly, how he was given Lex Wexner's wealth to do with as he wished. He was given the house, given power of attorney, all the contacts he had. I mean, he was a nobody who suddenly emerged as this extraordinary figure. So, there are lots of unanswered questions, and I don't think we can just say he was a smart guy with finance who had some useful mentors. And it's very interesting that Les Wexner has never spoken. And lots of people very closely involved with this tale haven't spoken. So, there's lots still to come out. I mean, whether it will come out is a moot point. I think it's a shame that these Epstein files, couldn't be released. There's an attempt clearly to save Trump's skin and to point the finger at Clinton, because clearly lots of people were involved. And it'd be fascinating to see, for example, how involved Sarah Ferguson is in all this. How often she saw him and when she saw him and how much money he gave her, etc.
Do you know how she originally got into debt with him?
Well, I don't think she got into debt with Epstein. She got into debt with members of her staff who she hadn't paid, a guy called Johnny O'Sullivan, who was based in New York. I think Kate Waddington, her PR person, hadn't also been paid. But she, these were debts that she had to lots and lots of people. And Epstein was kind of the banker being brought in as her solution to these problems. And she had this extraordinary attitude that she could do as she wanted. If people lent her money, she assumed it was a gift, that she didn't need to pay bills. She would walk out of hotels and with huge room service bills and not pay them. Her publishers I talked to had put her up in a very swanky hotel. They paid for the hotel, but they expected her to pay for room service and the bar bill, which they said was in the end came to more than the cost of the room. So she just takes advantage. She's a complete, ligger.
I remember that undercover sting, like a media sting, where she was trying to sell access to Andrew. Do you remember that?
Yep. Yes, May 2010. It was, I think, £500,000. She walked away with $40,000. All filmed. She denied it, but and tried to sue the News of the World, and then gave up when they showed that they'd taped everything and had her banged to rights. But of course, the reason they were taping her was because they'd heard that she was doing this. This wasn't a first isolated incident. She and Andrew, and she, of course, Andrew denied having any involvement, had been doing this, before. So, this corruption goes way, way back.
Perhaps that's why she's back with him, so she could reestablish that scam.
Yeah, well, exactly. That's why she's never really left him, because that's her calling card. She's nothing without Andrew, and of course this was a great concern to Elizabeth and Philip, that her son couldn't move on while she clung limpet-like to him, and not only did she get the free accommodation and the chef and everything else, the great lifestyle, but she was able to go to family events. It's extraordinary. They divorced in 1996, and there she is in the royal box at Wimbledon. There she is walking to church. It's extraordinary, particularly given the scandals around her. It's not just News of the World. There have been a series of court cases where she's not been able to explain large sums of money put into her bank accounts from people that she hardly knows, and these have never really been properly investigated. So, big questions hang over this couple.
Yeah, so a lot of people, wonder about the origin of Prince Andrew meeting Epstein then. So just in summary then, so Fergie's dysfunctional finances led to her owing a lot of people money. And then you said Jeffrey fixed that situation for her. And then in exchange, she introduced Andrew to Jeffrey. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think the introduction was there, and I think that they probably thought that he would be a useful person to pay her bills. But I think there were all sorts of other perks. They were often staying at his houses, and they continued to stay at his houses long after 2010, when they'd said they'd broken off contact. But I think once they were in there, they realized that they could milk this guy, and he, of course, was happy to oblige. He put them in some form of sort of obligation to him. And that's what he wanted. And as we know, he was blackmailing all sorts of people. He was trading information, and they'd sort of walked into his trap.
So what year approximately did Jeffrey and Andrew start pallying up?
Well, as I say, the date seems to be 1991. We don't have a great deal of evidence of what they were doing at that point. Andrew was still in the Navy, but he had very long shore leaves. He was off, for example, in Kazakhstan doing business in 1994. So, that again needs more research. But that period of both Andrew's life is pretty opaque, and also that's the case with Epstein as well.
So how long did that relationship last?
Well, the relationship between Andrew and Epstein lasted till the day Epstein died. I don't think they were. We know from the depositions in the Barclays case and with Jess Slaley and others that they were still doing business together. They were still communicating and meeting. So I don't think anything changed after 2010. It went on and on and on until the death in the correctional facility.
So that's quite a long period of time then. Could we go over it chronologically and just look at the most notable moments? What would you say would be the first most notable moment?
Well, we have 1999 when he's the first recording of Andrew on the Lolita flight going out to the island. I think that's important. We have clearly the famous episode December 2010 when he's photographed going to say goodbye to Epstein. He's photographed in the park, where, of course, set up by Epstein, walking in Central Park. And it's from that moment also that we have him waving goodbye to Catherine Keating in a very affectionate way through the door. So I think those are the two key points. But then, of course, we have all the other episodes, 2008, 2009, when Epstein is serving his correctional sentence, his very open sentence, and he was out basically, either in his office or actually even being able to go to his home and travel. We were trying to get a sense of what he was doing with Andrew then. The problem is we have the flight logs, not all the flight logs. We have testimony from some people, like, for example, Virginia Giuffre in the famous meeting in March 2001, when she claims that he first slept with her, and that relationship, if you can call it that, took place in that spring. We have accounts from other people seeing Andrew on the island at later dates, but there's still a lot of information that we need to fill in there.
Yeah, so I'm keep going. I'm just going to change my battery. Looking at Virginia's allegations, then, and we've got to be careful with our language here. We've got the third allegation on the island. Are you familiar with what she said about Prince Andrew?
Yes. I mean, clearly that has been challenged by lots of people. It's I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt on this. She's working with a ghostwriter. Things are being bigged up to sell for a book. She's a traumatized girl who, perhaps over eggs the pudding at times. But generally, she's been pretty consistent. And my experience with the material I've been able to corroborate is that her story sticks. So we know that Andrew was on the island. I mean, there are people talking about her grinding away with Virginia Giuffre on the island, Steve Scully, for example. So, I'm inclined to believe her. No one has provided any proper evidence disproving it. I mean, they mock it, they try and discredit the photo, but I've seen no evidence that shows the photo isn't actually completely genuine, and that she had these three episodes. Whether they were one-to-one with Andrew or part of an orgy is another question. But the problem is most of these girls were young girls from Russia and elsewhere, bussed in and flown in and flown out. No one knows where they are, probably married with children. The last thing they want to do, even if they were traced, is to go public. They've signed NDAs. There's no reason for them to come forward. There are lots and lots of people, I think, who are very happy to keep the story under wraps.
Yeah, and Virginia said that Jeffrey and Galain and Andrew and Jean-Luc Mel were joking that those girls couldn't even speak any English, and they were the easiest ones to get away with doing these things to, because they didn't even speak any English.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these were very vulnerable young girls, and it's just cynical the way that they operated. And, one of the things I found from talking to Laura Burns, who was the researcher on this Panorama program, and she got a lot of really interesting stuff, is, she has emails with Galain and Andrew discussing Virginia, the woman that they claim never to have met, and how they would deal with her. And PR firms were brought in to try and discredit her, and some of those PR firms still continue to spread their poison now.
So you've got Prince Andrew saying he doesn't recall Virginia, that the photos are fake. Lady Victoria Hervey managed to pretend to be interested in the property and get in there, and and do this crazy thing where she said that they wouldn't even fit by the banister. I mean, what do you make of all of these attempts to debunk Virginia's claims about the photo?
Well, these are people who I understand are in the pay of people who are promoting Andrew and Galain. So I don't take anything they say seriously whatsoever. There's no evidence to support that the photo was faked, and they haven't been able to provide any.
And the payout that came, what do you think was the basis that Andrew was told to make that payout?
Well, I mean, the excuse is that it was to shut the story down and not overshadow the Jubilee. But he basically didn't want to go into court where there would be depositions, and it was easier to settle it and draw a line under it and not have to go through any of the legal process, which might have brought out all sorts of other things. So it was the least worst option, damage limitation.
Have you thought about why someone in his position would, do something like that to Virginia, when he's got children of his own and he's so high profile? Is it arrogance, ego? He just thinks he can get away with anything, elite deviance? What would you say made him engage in these behaviors and even go back to Epstein after his conviction?
Well, I mean, most of those things. I mean, the fact that he, his libido for a start, and I think the sense that he felt he was invincible, that he was protected, that the protection officers wouldn't say anything. The diplomatic staff who saw this stuff going on, he would actually borrow the New York consulate's car to go off on these assignations. That none of the people would break rank and say anything, and so he could do exactly what he wanted. And as you say, these were girls who weren't going to be in a position to do anything or put any pressure on him. And I think he's naive. He kind of thought that Epstein was his friend, and I don't think Epstein was. He was using him.
Because Paul Page went into detail with us as to the logistics of the information they would have ascertained about Epstein, and the Americans would have had information, and there would have been a discussion, and they would have advised Prince Andrew not to go and see him, and Prince Andrew would have had to have overrode that decision to continue to go see him.
Absolutely. I mean, I hear that story time and time again with all sorts of people warned not to have contact. Fergie was warned not to have contact with Steve Wyatt because of his intelligence links with the foreign powers, and she just ignored it. So, and this is, why did you do the Newsnight interview when everyone told him not to do it? Because he thinks he knows better. And one of the themes of the book is the rules don't apply to Andrew. So he'll use his mobile in a place where he's been told not to use his mobile. He'll do traffic things where he's not allowed to do traffic things. He didn't go to the roll call at Gordonston like all the other pupils because he didn't think he was too important to go to roll call. That's him.
So what do you think when Andrew said that he went to Jeffrey's to sever the friendship and it was a dutiful, honourable thing for him to do?
Well, I mean, it's a ridiculous statement, and I mean, people, as you say, pointed out almost immediately. You don't go 5 days to someone to say goodbye. You don't have dinner parties thrown in your honour. You don't go and stay with someone when there are plenty of hotels around the corner, including the use of the New York consulate. It's just a brazen lie, and that seems to be what he does. He doesn't sort of realise just how stupid he is.
All right, well, we've looked at what was in it for Andrew with this relationship with Epstein. Let's look a little bit closer then at what was in it for Epstein, because, in your book, link in the description box, folks, you're alleging that compromising material may have been passed on to Israel's Mossad Secret Service, the Saudi Arabian authorities, and Gaddafi's Libyan intelligence services by Epstein. Could you expand on all of this, please?
Yes, I mean, a lot of the stuff that I had was taken up by the lawyers on Libya and the Middle East. So, it makes it slightly difficult to justify some of them. But for example, there's a man called Tim Riley who worked for Kroll, who talks about the compromat that the Russians had on Andrew. There is a Kazakhstan businessman that I interview who describes how Andrew would go to nightclubs, be taken back into private rooms, would be entertained by escorts provided by the government or the businesses that he was involved with, which was pretty standard practice. And indeed, I talked to various British businessmen operating there who said it was standard business to basically offer prostitutes. We have the private secretary asking at the consul in South Africa, saying, Andrew likes blondes, can you provide some? So we have a lot of people on the record talking about this. And everyone I talked to said, of course, what they would do then is have a honey trap. This wasn't from the goodness of their heart. And we know, of course, from Mark Dugan that there were tapes taken of people going to the Epstein premises. These tapes were taken in by the FBI in 2006. He has some himself, which he took to Russia. So we know about these things. Virginia Giuffre has talked about the blackmailing that Epstein did, and how Andrew was a pretty obvious target. And we have Steve Hoffenberg talking how Andrew and Clinton were the trophy ball prizes for him in terms of people that he could compromise. So I don't think there's any doubt about the material. And of course, it's standard practice for all those intelligence agencies to have honey traps and then film people.
And Juliet Bryant, survivor, talked about going in the control room and talking to the control room operator where all of the screens were for the stuff they were filming in one of Jeffrey's properties. So we've been told, by the US government in recent months that there was no links to Israel. Move on, nothing to see here. Jeffrey's a lone wolf, no conspiracy, etc. But you're saying you're convinced that Jeffrey was providing information to multiple intelligence agencies. Could you prioritize those intelligence agencies in terms of which ones he was most doing business with?
Well, I don't buy the story that he was a sort of a paid-up agent for a particular agency, let's say like Mossad. I think he was a freelancer who was just selling stuff to the highest bidder and trading one person off against another. In terms of this conspiracy and in terms of building it up, clearly there must have been people who helped him, and clearly the links that make sense there are Mossad with Maxwell and others. But I think he was a freelancer, and he would do business as a lot. And I don't know what Ben Menashe is saying, but I would have thought that these guys basically go to the highest bidder and they play each other off.
Yeah, I mean that is quite feasible. Menashe said that Prince Andrew was a useful idiot for Israeli intelligence, but that's he's because he was former Israeli military intelligence. That's the side he would hear. So if Jeffrey was dealing with everybody else, we'd have to have interview people from those jurisdictions really to get that side of it. And I think the CIA would have been in there as well. I think.
Well, we know.
Sorry
to interrupt, but we know the reason he was given that lenient sentence was that they were told, Costa was told, he's an intelligence. Basically, leave him alone. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, you're fine. You're doing great. And Candace Owens last night talked about an interview, an exclusive that Ghislaine Maxwell did from prison with a Mrs. Barak, and she hadn't put it together that the host was a cousin of Ehud Barak, and we're looking at all of the visits to Jeffrey's property, and then if you look at the funeral of Robert Maxwell, in Israel, it does seem that Israel had a primary role, I would say, in Jeffrey's activities, Dershowitz, etc. There's just so many Israel connections.
Yes, no, I agree. I mean, I think that's probably right. that would make most sense. And I suppose all we can hope is other people may come forward from other agencies to fill out the story.
So you're talking about Saudi Arabian authorities also received compromising material on Andrew from Epstein. Could you expand on that?
Well, we know that Andrew is doing a lot of business in the Middle East, and indeed his daughters are now doing business in the Middle East. He's very close to the ruler in Abu Dhabi. He's been given a palace there. I think they were at school together briefly. And it's a very easy area to go under the radar. One of his former private secretaries has a key position in the economic in one of the economic development agencies in the Middle East. So I think he is doing a lot of business there, but and thinks they're friends. But I think they clearly are collecting material on him. I mean, everyone in this sort of dog eat dog world is picking up stuff, and it's just extraordinary that he kind of walks into these traps. But he is very low hanging fruit.
Wouldn't Prince Andrew have realized at some point that Jeffrey was using him in this fashion?
I'm told by one former girlfriend that he did, and that was one of the reasons again for the visit in December 2010, partly to get more money for Fergie, nothing to do with breaking up. But it was also to get reassurances from Epstein that he wasn't going to use anything that he had on him. And the Epstein-Trump relationship, I understand, really broke down because Epstein thought that Trump would pardon him. Trump said no. Epstein threatened to expose Trump. And that's where things, got nasty. And in fact, shortly afterwards, Epstein was arrested and, of course, died shortly afterwards. So, I think certainly one person has told me that a former Epstein employee says that Trump was behind the death of Epstein.
What's your take on the sweetheart deal?
With Galain now?
No, that's coming. The original one, yeah.
The original one, yeah. So there's so many sweetheart deals. Well, I mean, it's pretty obvious. I mean, he had good lawyers, and Acosta basically had pressure put on him, and they found every excuse to basically give him the most extraordinary lenient sentence. No one's ever seen before. He had very good connections. He had lots of money. He knew, I think, probably where a lot of the bodies were buried, and he was able to leverage that. I don't think anyone feels that deal. I think the lawyers were appalled by what went on. Everyone feels there was complete stitch up then, as we're now seeing complete stitch up with Galain. Moved to a prison way out of sight from everyone. You would think she'd be brought closer to Washington if they were keen for her to give testimony. And be quietly sort of disappeared, into the witness protection scheme, or she can literally, I understand, just walk out the gate and go. So, there's no need for a pardon. She just disappears.
How can an administration that says it's fighting the human transportation of girls, put Maxwell in a cushy, club-fed prison and be on the verge of pardoning Maxwell? Because I don't know if you've seen some of the recent things that Trump's saying. He's saying that people who are hurt in this case, who shouldn't have been hurt, it basically they're going to undo that, which I'm interpreting as she's about to get pardoned or commuted, or she's not going to do that 20.
No. I mean, but as I say, I don't think she's going to even be pardoned. She'll just disappear. There'll be no scrutiny of what's going on in the prison. I mean, who can reveal what's happened to her? So he'll duck the issue. But we all can see what's going on, and we all have the accounts of Trump being removed from all the paperwork in the files, and attempts to smear people like Bill Clinton. So it's pretty obvious. But I think people are going to be very angry if they feel that the victims have been ignored and the perpetrator of these crimes is being rewarded. And that's why I think Trump wants to duck the issue. And is being rather sort of mealy-mouthed about it and vague. I'm sure all sorts of plans are going on behind closed doors, just that we don't know about them.
Yeah, the victims we're speaking to are absolutely up in arms over this. So you're saying then that she's going to be put out of view? Is that in the prison system, or she would be released and no one will even know about it?
I think she'll be put on a plane and she'll go to Costa Rica or something. She will just disappear, and people won't realize. There'll be a line that she's being moved to another prison, so that the present prisoners don't know where, can't report her missing, and then she'll be driven down the road and the door will be opened and she'll be off into a private plane, and that's the last we'll hear of her. Job done.
Sipping a cocktail on the beach with Kenneth Lay with his facial reconstruction.
Exactly. I mean, there'll be a whole group of people there with Lord Lucan as well.
So Stephen Hoffenberg, then, we were chatting earlier. He's someone I was speaking to. I was about to interview him actually before he was found dead. His corpse had been left for a week in the property. Maria Farmer was talking to him back then. And you researched Stephen Hoffenberg. So what did you find out was his perspective?
Well, I mean, he was. I know that when he discovered that Epstein had died, he was in a hospital up in New England. He absolutely panicked. He didn't want anyone to come near him. He didn't want to get any injections. He was frightened for his life. He knew that there was a hit list, and he would be on it. He did, as you say, die in rather mysterious circumstances, as so many people in this story have died early deaths. I mean, I'm thinking of Ricuri, the policeman in Palm Beach as well, Virginia Giuffre, many of the victims, Jean-Louis Brunel. I would say this is beyond if you were to talk to a statistician, this is beyond what might likely happen.
Yeah, and Hoffenberg was Jeffrey's partner in a huge financial fraud. And it's like Jeffrey went from school teacher to fraudster, and Hoffenberg took the fall, but Jeffrey somehow got a pass, because many people ask, where did his money come from? And that was the beginning of it, wasn't it? And then Wexner gave him the property, yep. Black gave him over 100 million in fees, and it just parlayed from there.
I mean, it's extraordinary. I mean, Hoffenberg went to prison for 18 years, and nothing happened to Epstein, and they were both in it as deeply as each other. But Hoffenberg, I think, is a very, very good witness, and the interviews I've seen with him have been very revealing.
Yeah, it's just a pity I never got to interview him. So another person who didn't make it was John Mark Duggan's colleague, Joseph Ricuri, who was his fellow Florida cop.
Sorry, Ricuri. I call him Ricuri, yes.
Yeah, he told John Mark Duggan that if they gave the evidence to the superiors, it would never see the light of day. And then he was only in his 50s, perfectly healthy, and he died mysteriously as well.
Yes, I approached his widow to try and find out more.
And what did she say?
Wouldn't talk. So whether she was paid off or just didn't want to get involved, who knows?
Did you manage to speak to any of the other Florida police department?
No, I think one that appeared in a television program. That was about it. So no, I mean, again, there's an inertia around this story. People are either scared or paid off, or don't want the hassle. I can understand that. Why should they? And that's why it's so brave of some of the victims to come forward and talk. But I think other people just, life's complicated enough without getting involved like this.
So do you think all this evidence that was seized then, and Pam Bondi touched on something, she said that if all of the evidence in the Epstein case was released, it would be catastrophic for society. Is that because both political parties, captains of industry, people at the top of tech, the academic institutions, intellectuals, there's a hell of a lot of them were compromised by Jeffrey. Is that why it would be catastrophic for society for us to see the extent of what he did?
Yes, I think so. I mean, we can get some indication of the range of his contacts from the Black Book. I mean, the fact they're in the Black Book doesn't mean that they've done anything untoward, but we've also got the Lolita flight digests. And, various people like Tom Prisker, head of the Hyatt Hotel Group, who has been accused of rape by Virginia Giuffre and has denied it, of course. He was flying to Sandringham on that visit with Epstein and Maxwell and Andrew. So that, there are lots of names there which keep being mentioned. Sarah Ransom talked about Richard Branson and then retracted it, then said, actually, no, she'd been forced to retract it. He, of course, leapt on that. There are a lot of names with, hints from people that, they were much more involved than they've let on.
Did you try to contact anybody from the Black Book?
Yes, I did. Yes, and got no response.
Okay, so we'll move on to some of the other parts of your book, and viewers, if you're interested in the book, I am going to put the links in the live chat again right now. Andrew's book is called entitled "The Rise and Fall of the House of York," and we've got almost 2,000 people watching live presently across all of the socials. So that link is going to go out on all of the socials right now, and it's also, if you watch this on replay, it's going to go out in the description box. And I know you guys have got tons of questions, so keep the questions coming in. We're going to go through some of the other revelations in the book, and then we'll conclude with your viewer questions. So this punch up then with Harry and Prince Andrew. Could you expand on that, please?
Well, it's a paragraph from the book. I never expected it to generate quite so much interest. I should have sort of thought this through. Anything on Harry, it comes from a good source. I stand by it. The two episodes, they tend to get conflated. There's the one in 2013 and then the one in 2017 about Meghan. He's gone on the record saying that he's sent legal letters to my publisher. And I think he's been very protective of Meghan. I think it's a strange thing to do. All it's done is given publicity to the book and helped me sell a few more copies. And looking at the comments, most people say, well done, Harry, for giving Andrew a punch. So it seems a very strange thing for him to do, but he does seem to be litigious. He has a history of, as we all know, of throwing his fists. Let's see what happens. We can perhaps agree to differ that recollections vary.
So when you get a legal letter like that, great PR boost for the book. And what would the person be trying to achieve? Because the cat's already out of the bag. Would it be like threatening a defamation lawsuit down the road?
Yes, it's like one of what we call strategic law slaps, strategic law something or other, and they're using financial pressure to scare people. So it's a form of intimidation. And Shillings are one of the companies that do it. They represent a lot of, I would say, pretty dubious people, and they will just write letters to scare people, perhaps to scare publishers, other people, for example, from reporting stories, the press, perhaps encouraging publishers to change things in the book, particularly in the ebook edition. Intimidating authors so that they perhaps hold back from saying everything they could when they do podcasts like this. For example, Fergies lawyers were writing to my publisher's Collins before the book came out, saying they were monitoring my social media. I'm sure they're watching this to try and gather any information they can to bring some sort of lawsuit. And one of the points I bring out in the book is the number of lawsuits that Fergie brought, often abandoning them because they hadn't got a chance in hell. But it's all part of intimidating people, trying to change the narrative. What Harry was trying to do was undermine my credibility, saying, look, he just makes stuff up, and this isn't true. So, the lawyers who looked at the letter that we had said that out of 10, it's a 2. It's nothing. This thing is going to die. Harry isn't going to pursue this case. He's not going to want to go into court and be subpoenaed and have Andrew have to give depositions. And what damage has been done to him? It's actually improved his public standing. And what damage can be done to Andrew given his reputation? So it's complete. It's just a publicity thing. And that's fine by me. It's helped me sell a few more books.
Yeah, I think the idea of Prince Harry bopping Prince Andrew, giving him a bloody nose, Well, I've got to be careful what I say. Let me move on. Okay, so Meghan Markle was accused of bullying the staff, which she has denied. So I heard that a long time ago, that she was really abrasive with the staff. And do you have any anecdotes of that?
Well, Meghan isn't really part of my story. So, I mean, clearly lots of stories of Andrew bullying staff, and I've drawn the conclusion that the Meghan report hasn't been released because it would open the floodgates to other complaints about Andrew. And, well, I would say only Andrew. I can't think of other members of the royal family who behaved in that way. Most of them have incredibly good relations with the staff, and the staff are very loyal to them.
So, these people are worth so much money, yet they're always looking for new ways to cash in, aren't they? And if we look at Andrew's mysterious and freebies, let's look at the mysterious finances then. So his Royal Navy pension, do you know what that amounts to?
No, I tried to find that out. I mean, and no one seemed to know. I mean, there are all sorts of variables, but I thought someone with that length of service, at that rank, and with some of the add-ons that he had, it would be pretty open information. But I found that difficult to get. I mean, the figure that's quoted is I think a very low figure, because it's a figure that goes back many years. But he's not living off his pension. He's living off trust income that he would have got from money probably from his grandmother, and of course we can't see royal will, so we don't know what happens there. But he's been making quite a lot of money. We can see that because we have some companies that we can monitor. The most famous is Pitch at the Palace Global, in which he was taking a 2% commission for investor income in Pitch at Palace, and we can see the money's going in there. A lot of it from China with the Chinese spy Tenbo, and we can see the money being withdrawn. So. And various, as you say, stories have emerged in the press. This 350,000 that he was paid by this woman, this Turkish millionairess, which he didn't return. And there was a famous case report in the papers of him taking $3.8 million commission on a water deal in Kazakhstan. That money never was paid to him. Because the project didn't go through, but it gives a sense of the sums that perhaps were being discussed. And if there was one of those business operations going on, I suspect there were others.
Because if you look at his living expenses, then he's in a 30-room royal lodge, which he spent £7.5 million refurbishing, and has annual running costs of £250,000 a year, which is over $300,000. That's quite a lot of space to live in, isn't it?
It is. And I mean, having a huge staff. I mean, it's just him and Fergie in her 4-room apartment, or 4-bedroom apartment, I think. No, I mean, they have folie de grandeur. This is Marie Antoinette stuff. And the optics don't look good, where you can understand why King Charles wants him out. And you can understand why King William wouldn't want to move there. It would look pretty bad if William, who's already got several large properties, moved there at a time when he's championing the need to address homelessness. So, but Andrew doesn't care. This is his last bit of status. It's the last thing he has to grab onto. And so he's going to stay there. He's been there 20 years. He feels he's legitimately paid for it. He would get some money back if he was forced out or chose to go out under the terms. But he's why should he go? And that's the real problem. There was a big campaign with Charles last year, but in some ways that backfired. It made Charles look petty and vindictive, and made Andrew look like the victim. And it was something that he couldn't win.
So the money that was paid to Virginia, where did that come from?
Well, possibly it came from the sale of their Swiss chalet. Possibly some of it came from the Queen, though whether it was a part payment that went to a charity, I think that's more likely. But he has money. I mean, they were complaining they had no money, and then Fergie managed to buy, I think, 2 £4 million houses in Belgravia, which rather sort of made the person who gave them a special deal pretty annoyed. So there is money running around. And we've got to remember that they receive gifts from people, gifts which can then be, particularly jewelry, which can then be turned into money. And so, there are lots of forms of income. I don't think we should be too worried about how they found the money. There was talk that Charles had lent him some money. Who knows? But I suspect the money was there.
So if the Queen paid some of the millions that went to Virginia, does that mean that's the UK taxpayers' money she would have drawn?
No, I think the money would have come from private funds. I don't think the taxpayer had to pay. They may have had to pay for a long time after 2019 for a security. I think it's private security now, and then it was before that Charles. But I think for a long time we were paying for his security. But I think people were looking at those sort of questions, and I think they were cutting loose in terms of his drain on the public purse.
And he uses his children to launder these gifts, it seems, because there's instances in the book where there was the solitaire diamond necklace for Beatrice. You got the convicted Libyan gun smuggler. You've got the Turkish, the misuse of funds, another gift for Beatrice's wedding, etc. So fancy putting your own kids in the conspiracy.
Well, they are all involved. I think this is why it's foolish to push them as working royals, because there are various skeletons in the cupboard there, and the people have been beginning to look at this, particularly in the Middle East, where they have a very good address book, courtesy of their parents, and where a lot of things go under the radar. So, there are, I suspect, fresh scandals to emerge, and they need to be very careful. But it is a family business, this.
What about the scandal with the topless Thai ladies? Did you remember that one?
Yes, on the yacht in Thailand. He claims, there are pictures of him lying on this yacht with these topless women, many of them involved with people involved in drugs, and people were very concerned about the people he was mixing with. He claims he was reading a book. He's not a man who generally reads books, so it doesn't seem a very good excuse. From my understanding, he was staying at this resort. It was a boat that went out for the day, and he joined the party. And but of course, it looked very unfortunate to be surrounded by these topless beauties, having water fights and looking rather frivolous. And this is sort of the beginning of his midlife crisis. He leaves the Navy, age 41. And begins to though he'd had affairs before that, he begins to sort of sow his wild oats, all captured, unfortunately, a lot of it captured on film. He often went and stayed in Brazil. That was another place, with a friend who had a house there, who also had a house in Thailand, Johan Eliash, and it was always photographed with sort of Playboy models and things. The people he was mixing with were not high-powered businesswomen. They were actresses, models, generally much younger than him. Not the sort of people that would, is a good look if you were a middle-aged prince.
Do you think he's so delusional that he just wants to creep back into royal duties? Because it seems there's an effort to do that periodically, and then something pushes him back into the shadows.
Yes, they're constantly testing the waters, and Fergie is the same. I think to a large extent they've now transferred their ambitions to the daughters, and the push to be working royals. If you look at particular papers, are pumping out pieces every day on Beatrice and Eugenie, and how popular they are, and how pretty they are, and how well connected, and what a help they could be to William, etc. Then you look at the comments below, and people say, no, we don't want these people. They're pretty tainted by their parents. So there's a little bit of a disconnect there. So it'll be interesting. But these people keep popping back. I call them the Rasputins of the royal family. You can't keep them down. Fergie is the great returner. She goes through scandal after scandal, and it's water off a duck's back, and back she pops. And makes friends with someone else in the family, and she's brought back and goes, on the little walk down to Sandringham, and she's back in there.
Right, I've been hogging Andrew for over an hour, viewers, and I know questions have been coming in. So get your questions in now, folks. I'm going to ask him one more, then I'm going to start to give him your questions. My question, Andrew, is what do you think is in store for Prince Andrew from here?
Well, I mean, I think, much of the same, basically being under house arrest at Royal Lodge, watching videos, playing golf, going occasional rides, going shooting at friends' estates or having them shoot at Sandringham. I think possibly visits to play golf in Portugal and see his daughter, possibly still doing business in the Middle East, flying out there on private jets, clearly dealing with his investments, which he's very keen on. But I think he's going to be kept out of public view. And in the wider picture, I think we may see some changes in terms of the royal family and what they do. I mean, I hope more transparency about how they operate, particularly on their finances. It'll be interesting to see how Fergie bounces back from all this. She's got her own third or fourth volume of memoir coming out. She plays the victim. I'm a cancer survivor. I do all these great works for charity. And just see what transpires there. I think that's the more interesting thing to watch. And I think the girls will continue to keep pushing to have a higher, more prominent role.
So Juliet wants to know, what's the story of Prince Andrew and Koo Stark?
Well, the story is that, they had this relationship just before he went off the Falklands. It kind of petered out when he got back. The argument is that because the press had discovered her pretty racy film career in nude films, being nude in films, that the royal family put their foot down and killed the relationship. According to her, and she has gone public on this, it kind of just petered out. He kind of lost interest or didn't make much effort, and she'd gone traveling to get away from it. And when she came back, it kind of never really started. But, he's a godfather to her daughter. They clearly remain friends. She's never spoken harshly about him, came out in defense after the Epstein allegations. And I think the feeling is that, if he had married her, it might have actually been a very different story. So in some ways, that's a sad sort of missed fork in the road. So yeah, it's just one of those things. In some ways, she would have been more suitable than Fergie.
Thanks for the questions coming in, folks. You've got a unique opportunity right now to ask Andrew anything. And Anne-Marie, Andrew, what, in your view, is Prince Andrew's best and worst characteristics?
Well, I think to his credit, he has, I think, been pretty loyal. Has been very good as a father. I mean, that's certainly the reputation. I mean, the fact that they've stayed together as a couple and joint co-parented and grandparented, I think people admire him for that. I think, he did some good things with Pitch at the Palace, and that's why it's sad that it was sullied by this attempt to get rich on the back of it. A lot of people were helped with Pitch at the Palace. And I think he did some pretty good things as special trade envoy, at places like the Middle East where he could be deployed and where he did have respect and carry weight. What are his worst characteristics? Well, I think the lying, the pretty sordid private life, the greed, the dishonesty, financial dishonesty, I think that happened, the lack of openness about what he's doing. I mean, there's a long list. Take your pick.
All right. So next question is from Disco 1000. If Andrew follows the royal lifespan into his 90s, there are potentially many more teenagers who could be, whatted by him. Do you think that now he has been exposed publicly, he will no longer do the kind of thing that is alleged that he did with Virginia, let's say?
Yeah, I don't, buy into the story of him being a paedophile. I've seen no evidence to support that. I mean, he likes young women in their early 20s and, perhaps with Virginia age 17. But I think he's learned his lesson. I hope he's learned his lesson and is slightly more discreet. and is got relationships now with more age-suitable people. The word I've got is that he's been having an affair with the wife of one of his close friends. So I suspect things moved on. He's now in his mid-60s. He's not in the greatest of health. I don't think he's quite so randy-andy now. I do know that he has masseurs brought in, generally when his ex-wife is away, who come and basically what's called heal him to the sound of country music. So I think he's getting his oats in different ways.
He's getting the and he does not say anything. Okay. Next question is from Lillian. Why did the Turkish millionaire give Andrew money?
Well, that's the big $100,000 question. The sensible reason was he helped her get a passport, but I mean, he didn't have that power, and you would, of course, pay someone to get a passport. So she was misled. But he's never really explained this money. The case, I think, continues. It's gone through various incarnations. I've tried to find out more. I've approached the lawyers on both sides. I've looked at all the legal reports, what's in the public domain, and it's a real mystery. Some deal was done with the Yorks, basically to shut down their involvement. So it's now focused on the relationship between Isabel and Salman Turk. But all sorts of names come into it. Tarak Khatuni, who was, as Shaun was saying, was very much involved in their business activities and was giving gifts to members of the family. A man called Adrian Gleave, who's also runs a company called Alphabet Capital that was giving money to Fergies. So it's very difficult to pin down how all the firms operate together, because they tend to be firms that have no staff, have no premises, don't seem to be doing anything, and yet there seems to be money being shifted around. So I have to be careful on legal grounds, but this is one of the areas that the lawyers looked at very carefully. But I think there's certainly a lot more to that story than has come out. Whether we'll ever know the full story, I interviewed Salman Turk, but he didn't, as you can imagine, tell me the full story. We'll never know.
Is your publisher under a lot of pressure from the palace right now?
They're certainly under pressure from various lawyers acting for various people, and who they're acting for isn't always clear. Clearly a word has been put out into the media not to cover my book, for example. It's all made up. I'm not reliable, etc. The same old things I had in previous books. So yeah, there are tame people. I got savaged on a interview with a channel last night, completely hijacked with someone who wouldn't allow me even to talk.
What? Who? I won't ask who, because it'll just advertise it. Tell me later. But
anyway, someone who's a very establishment figure, and was trying to earn some brownie points, and clearly hadn't even read the book. So
not bloody Piers.
No, not Piers Morgan.
Okay.
But someone else. Piers Morgan is very friendly to Fergie, so I know I'm sort of prepared if I do an interview with Piers Morgan what's going to happen. But a very good question. How can so many people still be romanticizing this morally bankrupt family? Well, they still shape the narrative. They have PR people and lawyers and a very deferential press, and people want to buy into the dream. And some of them do a terrific job, and I think should be respected and admired. But quite a lot of them, I'm afraid, and this couple is a good example, are doing very little for their country and doing an awful lot for themselves.
Does the royal family have any relevance in the future? Will we always have them, or maybe let them live normal lives like everyone else?
Well, who knows? Other monarchies have collapsed and were one of the few survivors, but it's been very resilient. It's gone through a lot of scandals, a lot of changes. I mean, one of its strengths is its ability to evolve. I think the future actually looks fine. We've got William and Catherine, who are very popular, who I think have a very clear sense of what a modern monarchy should look like. It should be relatable, but it should still have that dignity. It should clearly have a very strong role with its charitable work. It should be an example to the country in terms of their lifestyle. But we have their children who look like beautifully brought up children, very endearing and brought up with the same values. So I think the monarchy will survive, but who knows? It has to be put. It's going to be quite difficult to kill it. I think we'll see it playing a less influential role, and I think a downplaying of a lot of the pomp, certainly a streamlined monarchy, and much more focus on the core principles and fewer people standing on the balcony.
H wants to know, why are Sarah and Charles so interested in Transylvania? Aren't they descended from Vlad the Impaler?
Yeah, Charles sort of fell in love with the country and has brought property there and has been very supportive. And he has these quirks of places that clearly speak to him, and it's a great thing. I don't think Sarah Ferguson is very interested in Transylvania, but she's done a lot of relief work in places like Romania and Poland, but I've not come across her in Transylvania. What are my qualifications? Well, 4 years of research. I mean, I'm a trained historian. I have a PhD, fellow of the Royal Society of History, and was a fellow of a Cambridge college. So this is academic rigor I hope I bring to it. I hope I bring my reputation for being accurate and meticulous in my research. But clearly I would have a much easier life if I wrote about less controversial subjects. I mean, I'm accused of just doing salacious. I was described as writing salacious rubbish. And of course, one's going to get these attacks, and that's why it's important that my sources are reliable. I do double check them, and that I'm not sort of undermined by some of the material I have to draw on. But I think a crystallizing moment for me was actually researching my intelligence book on Guy Burgess and seeing the cover-ups that go on and the reluctance to reveal papers, and that was cemented subsequently by my book on Lord Mountbatten and then a book on Edward VIII. But I wasn't a royal historian to start with. I wrote literary biography. I then moved into intelligence books. So I'm not, as Victoria Harvey says, got this lifelong obsession with the royal family and the Yorks and some personal vendetta against them. I've got to confess I don't spend much time in my life thinking about the Yorks once I've done my research. But I do think it's important that that with anyone, whether it's a biographer or a journalist, that we do try and get to the truth, that we aren't just fed rubbish and put that stuff out. And that's what Shaun is doing with his podcast too. He's trying to get to the truth, and I just wish more people supported that, supported freedom of information and the organizations and the people who are keen to attack the curated version of our history and what I call the censorship.
Yeah, and Andrew's original podcast we did years ago, he talks about Burgess and Mountbatten and Kincora, and we're going to re-release that one on the 18th. So I'll put the link in the description box when I finish this interview. So, Sian, apart from the legal issues you are having, has your safety been affected at any time? Thank you for your level-headed approach.
No, I don't feel I'm going to be firebombed or run over. But clearly, if I disappear, found after a week and having disappeared, then maybe we should change that view. But they have other pressures, and one is discrediting you. One is trying to limit your profile, trying to stop the press talking, covering your books, which has happened. And clearly financial pressure through these slaps, these legal approaches to try and intimidate and scare one. But all that does is makes me double down and be more determined to tell the story and actually to turn it on these people and to say that one isn't going to give into this bullying and, to very happily meet them in court. Of course, these things get expensive and that's the problem. But I have the advantage with this book of my publishers being very supportive and actually fighting the cases on my behalf.
It takes years to write a book, and then all of a sudden it's done, and you're all over the media this week. Do you find it exhilarating or exhausting this week?
Well, a bit of both. Particularly, this is only the second day of broadcast interview. I couldn't talk. It was under embargo until yesterday. But I have a full-time job as an agent. I mean, I was having to do that in between interviews yesterday. Lots of people getting in touch. And it is exhilarating. It's good to see the reaction. It's nice when people support and reinforce what you found. Tom Sykes, who's a journalist at the Daily Beast, has been very supportive. He said, a lot of these stories I knew about, we couldn't report them. I'm now going to go public on them myself. So you don't feel that you're a lone person in this and can be picked off. So yeah, that is nice. And actually one of the things that came from this appearing on this program is the number of people, both on Twitter, but also contacted me directly saying, that was appalling what went on and how you were treated. And don't let it get you down. And those sort of small things really count. We are part of a big community who believe in the truth and holding powerful people to account, and that's one of the really nice things about it. Now, do I really think Epstein killed himself? No, I don't. I think all the evidence I've seen, and I put some of it in the book, and clearly there's a lot of it in the public domain. I don't think even his lawyers or anyone thinks that he killed himself. So I don't know what the second question was, Sarah. I hadn't finished reading it.
We had a Mark Epstein interview on last week, and he is adamant that there should be a murder investigation. That other one was about the Lownie name. Is it from Ireland?
Lownie name comes from the northeast of Scotland. But you're absolutely right. There are variations with branches of the family in Ireland, so there is a bit of Irish blood there. So you're absolutely right.
Can you explain why the freedom of information has the power to seal files for so long? Surely truth matters.
Well, freedom of information is meant to actually open the files. The problem is freedom of information is sort of going backwards at the moment. The reason that so many files are sealed are the exemptions that are in the Act, which can be interpreted as the public authorities wish. So they can accuse you of being vexatious if you ask too many questions. They hide behind cost compliance, saying there's too much material here, it'll be too expensive to look at it. They can hide behind national security, health and safety, personal data, relations with other countries, and of course the royal family have their own exemption, which means we can't look at anything connected with them. So we need a reform of the Freedom of Information Act. We need much greater implementation of it. The Information Commissioner is very weak. They have the powers, they're just choosing not to exercise them. And we just need more pressure from the courts and from the public, from Parliament, and from the media. That's the only way that things will change.
So Starmer was boasting to Trump that we've got excellent freedom of speech in this country. Do you think that's not the case?
No, I don't think we do. I think, we have, I see it in publishing. Publishers frightened to publish books. I've got one at the moment on Farage. People are scared of publishing the book because of libel and just the hassle of dealing with any nuisance suits brought. The press is much easier to do lifestyle, soft journalism lifestyle than to do hard-hitting investigations, where it's expensive in terms of employing journalists, but also in the legal costs. So those things are not happening. And people feel more and more frightened to speak out about things for being cancelled. Or I see it with even royal historians who daren't raise their head above the parapet because they would lose access to important sources of information. So yeah, it is rather depressing. I hope that the pendulum will swing back and people will realize how precious our freedom of speech is, and that we mustn't surrender it. We see what's going on in America at the moment, and that should give us pause for thought.
Dan Bongino said his stomach turned by what he saw in the files, yet still no action. What, in your opinion, do you think he saw?
Well, who knows? But it seems to me it takes quite a lot to turn the stomach of a senior official. I think there were clearly pictures of some pretty awful things happening, or film, clearly of young girls. I think that's what possibly was shocking. People talk about them being pornographic, but clearly there were perhaps people there or names there that were surprising. Who knows? We won't know until the material is released.
Why do you think
Why has
Maxwell
Maxwell
got
been moved
moved?
to Texas? Well, I think, as I said, I think she's been moved not to become closer to Washington, to be moved further away, where people can't monitor what's going on.
Okay, exactly who is Lady Victoria Hervey? Didn't she
Well,
date Prince Andrew at one point?
Yes, she claims that. I found no evidence to support that. And I'd be interested if anyone ever did find any evidence to support that. But clearly, she's very friendly with him. She's very close to a whole series of people who are championing the Galain Maxwell. There's the Maxwell brothers are paying a PR man to push this story that Maxwell is innocent and Andrew is innocent and Jeffrey is a liar. And she's part of that. I don't take her seriously. I don't know many people who do.
So you're getting asked about, oh, here's a nice one. Andrew, you are a modern day truth knight. Thank you for your true grit. And you were getting asked
well, that's
about...
nice of you to say that. Someone described me as an obsessive. I like to describe myself as determined and refusing to be bowed by bullies.
Deborah, Mr. Lownie, Andrew stated in that famous interview that he was injured. Did you find any proof of that?
I think she's referring to the fact that he had this syndrome that he couldn't sweat. But as everyone has been pointing out, plenty of pictures of him sweating in the year 2000, and no one had ever heard of this particular ailment. So, I'm afraid this is why I say lots of stuff is made up and you can't believe it. And why they should think that anyone could believe this stuff is just shows how unself-aware he is.
Why did the British government make Andrew a trade envoy if they knew he was so easily led and immoral?
Well, good question. I mean, Prince Charles was certainly against it and advised them. I think Blair and Mandelson were two of the people who were involved in this decision, and they thought that he needed to be parked somewhere. He needed to be given something to do aged 40, now that he'd left the Navy, and they thought he might be effective. I think the extraordinary thing is that when things went wrong pretty quickly, he wasn't moved aside or more properly supervised, but they kind of let him get on with it and do his own thing.
Thank you for the super sticker, Stephanie. Neil wants to know, is there any information about Andrew and Queen Victoria School in Dunblane?
No, I haven't researched that. I mean, I know there are people like Joanna Britton who have written a lot about that, but it's not something I've looked at.
Okay. Does Andrew think Meghan Markle has too much dirt on the royal family to let her go?
Well, I think that's always the suspicion. I mean, that's true of Fergie as well. And that's why they're held close. I mean, except that Meghan isn't being held very close at the moment. She's been sort of put at arm's length. But yeah, I mean, Meghan has hinted that she has stories she could tell. That must be a concern to them.
You're getting asked about the decision-making process in Savile getting knighted. Does that show an immoral, they don't consider these kinds of offences as too serious?
Well, the honours system should be independent. It should go through an independent honours committee. I mean, people clearly can make recommendations. And my reading of this is that if the royals make a recommendation, it tends to get pushed through. I think that's clearly where their power lies. But you would think there would be due diligence, anything that might actually blow back and be embarrassing. But, Savile, I mean, though he was living in plain sight. I mean, people were complaining about him and nothing was being done. And we see this time and time again, whether it's grooming gangs or Andrew. People just stick their head in the sand, don't want to know about it, don't want to address the problem.
Yeah, and he got away with it for many, many decades. Andrew, we've answered all the questions. Is there anything you'd like to say in conclusion to the viewers, and what can they look forward to when they click on the link and get your book?
Well, I mean, the British edition is an amazing value. It's £11, half price. It's 4 picture inserts, I think about 60 pages, all full color. It's extraordinary. I don't know how anyone can be making any money on that book. So it's incredibly good value. Someone just very kindly described it as a headline on every page. So we've only been able to dip into the tip of the iceberg of what's in the book. And so I hope you will want to read it and find out what else there is there.
Well, thank you for being with us. I know you're a busy man, especially this week. I'm going to close the show and let you go. Thank you for spending time with us, Andrew. Cheers.
It's always a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye. What a phenomenal guest, folks. So well researched, so eloquent and articulate. Thank you guys for all of your questions. I'm sure there's tons more in the book. So please support Andrew and get his book. There's the links again in the live chat. If you're watching it on replay, they're in the description box. And like I said, you know, we interviewed Andrew about Mountbatton, King Cora, fascinating Mountbatton's life. That podcast is coming out on the 18th of this month. I believe we've got it scheduled for that. We've just got that one ready. And then let me see what else we've got coming up. I've had Juliet Bryant has reached out, Epstein survivor, for a part 2 that she's looking to do with Audra, who came on talking about the Epstein baby farm. So we might be doing a joint broadcast with Juliet and Audra. And then we have got Kevin Annette coming on tomorrow night. And Kevin has just sent me an email yesterday, and he wants his video retitled to include Prince Andrew, Epstein. Let me see. He wants it to include Prince Andrew, Pope Leo, Epstein, and Donald Trump. And he says it's going to be his most interesting interview to date. He's got huge news on the Pope Leo case. So let's see what he has to say. So yeah, tons more content coming out soon, folks. Thank you for tuning in. If you missed the Paul Page one this morning, Prince Andrew's Royal Protection Officer, when I finish this video, it will redirect you to the Paul Page video. So check that one out as well. Lots of details about Prince